I thought that my wife went on a business trip for a week, but it turned out that she was actually cheating on me with her lover all that time. When I found out about it, instead of calling her, I called my lawyer. Now she ended up on the street having nothing. So there I was, living what I thought was the American dream in suburban Chicago. Name's Mike, and I had everything figured out. My own house that I bought before I even met my wife, Lauren, a thriving business that kept me busy but paid the bills, and what I believed was a solid 8-year relationship with 5 years of marriage under our belt. Life was routine, the kind of comfortable routine that makes you think you've got it all locked down. I'd wake up, grab my coffee, check the business emails, kiss Lauren goodbye, and head off to handle whatever crisis needed my attention that day. She worked at some marketing firm downtown, always talking about campaigns and client meetings and all that corporate stuff that honestly went over my head most of the time. Then one Tuesday evening, she drops this bomb on me while I'm watching a game and eating leftover pizza. She walks into the living room with this weird energy, like she's rehearsed what she's about to say 100 times in the mirror. She tells me the company is sending her on a business trip. A whole week, she says. Nothing too exciting, just some conference thing in Florida where they discuss marketing strategies and networking opportunities. Standard corporate nonsense, right? I mean, these trips happen maybe twice a year, so it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I remember thinking how tired she looked when she mentioned it. Like the whole idea of going was exhausting her before she even packed a bag. But hey, work is work, and we both understood that sometimes you got to do what the company asks if you want to keep climbing that ladder. The next few days, she's running around getting ready. New clothes, getting her nails done, buying travel-sized everything from Target. I offered to help her pack, being the supportive husband and all. We laid everything out on the bed, business casual outfits, her laptop bag, that little makeup case she takes everywhere. I made some stupid joke about how she better not fall asleep during those boring presentations. She laughed, but it was one of those laughs that didn't quite reach her eyes. Should have been my first red flag, but hindsight's always perfect, isn't it? The morning she left, I helped carry her suitcase to the car. She seemed nervous, kept checking her phone, and adjusted her hair in the rearview mirror. When I kissed her goodbye, she held on just a little too long. At the time, I thought it was sweet, like she'd miss me while she was gone. After she drove away, I went back inside, and the house felt different, quieter. You know how it is when your spouse travels. Suddenly you realize how much noise another person makes just by existing in the same space. The coffee maker seems louder. The TV echoes differently. Even your own footsteps sound weird on the hardwood floors. I threw myself into work that day. Had a big project deadline coming up, and honestly, the distraction was welcome. My business partner Dave and I were working on this commercial renovation that was turning into a nightmare of permits and contractor delays. The kind of job that makes you question why you didn't just become an accountant like your mother wanted. Lauren texted me around noon that her flight had landed safely. Standard stuff. Quick message saying everything went fine. Hotel room was decent. She'd call me later after settling in. Nothing that raised any alarm bells. Just the typical check-ins that married couples do when one of them is traveling. I texted back something supportive about how proud I was of her career ambitions and asked if the Florida weather was nice. Got back one of those thumbs-up emojis and a quick message about needing to get ready for the welcome dinner. Busy wife doing business trip things. Perfectly normal. That evening, I ordered pizza and settled in to watch whatever I wanted on TV for once. No negotiating over channels. No commentary about how unrealistic action movies are. Just me and a cold beer and whatever mindless entertainment I felt like consuming. She called around 9, sounding tired but upbeat. Told me about the fancy hotel, the boring welcome speeches, how the other conference attendees seemed pretty standard for corporate marketing types. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. Nothing deep or meaningful, just a surface-level conversation you have when someone's calling from a hotel room after a long day of travel. I went to bed that night feeling pretty good about everything. My wife was advancing her career. I had the house to myself for a few days, and life was exactly what it appeared to be on the surface. I was a supportive husband sending encouraging texts. She was a dedicated professional networking and learning at some corporate conference. That's the thing about trust. When it's real and complete, you don't spend your time looking for problems that aren't there. I wasn't sitting around wondering what she was really doing or who she might be with. I was just living my normal life, handling my business, and looking forward to having her back home in a few days. I remember lying in bed that first night, thinking about how lucky we were to have built such a solid relationship. 8 years together, 5 married, and we still supported each other's goals and gave each other space when needed. I was even planning to surprise her with flowers when she got back, maybe take her to that new steakhouse she'd been wanting to try. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She'd never given me any reason to doubt her before. Sure, we had our typical married couple disagreements about whose turn it was to do dishes or what to watch on Netflix, but nothing serious. Nothing that made me question the foundation of our relationship. Looking back now, I can see how completely naive I was. But at the time, everything seemed perfectly normal. Wife goes on business trip. Husband holds down the fort at home. Life continues as planned. I was the guy who helped her pack, kissed her goodbye, and made jokes about boring conference presentations. I was everything a good husband should be, loyal, trusting, and supportive of her career. I was also completely, utterly clueless about what was really happening while I sat at home eating pizza and planning romantic surprises for her return. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss, because the next day, that bliss was about to get absolutely destroyed. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my usual coffee and newspaper routine when my phone rang. Matt's name popped up on the caller ID, which was weird because we hadn't talked in probably 6 months. Matt and I went way back. College roommates, groomsmen in each other's weddings, the whole deal. But you know how it is after you graduate and get married. Life pulls you in different directions, and suddenly your best buddies become Christmas card contacts. So when I saw his name on a Wednesday morning, I figured maybe he was calling about our upcoming high school reunion or needed advice about some home improvement project. Matt was the type who'd call you at random times with completely random questions, like whether I thought he should refinish his deck, or if I knew a good mechanic in his area. I answered with my usual greeting, ready for whatever casual conversation was coming my way. Had no idea that this phone call was about to completely destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. His voice sounded strange right from the start. Not the usual laid-back Matt I remembered, but tense and uncomfortable, like he was about to deliver bad news to a terminal patient. He asked if I was sitting down, which immediately got my attention, because nobody asks that question unless they're about to drop a bomb on your life. I told him, yeah, I was sitting, and asked what was wrong. Maybe someone from college had died, or his parents were having health problems, or he was getting divorced. I ran through all the typical bad news scenarios in my head, but nothing prepared me for what came next. He told me he was on a cruise in the Caribbean with his wife, Sarah. Some romantic getaway they'd booked months ago to celebrate their anniversary. They were having a great time, enjoying the sun and the unlimited drinks, doing all that touristy cruise ship stuff that people do when they want to forget about real life for a week. Then he dropped the hammer. He'd just seen Lauren on the ship. Not just seen her, but watched her for a solid 10 minutes to make sure he wasn't going crazy. She was on the upper deck, lounging in the sun, wearing some dress he'd never seen before. And she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her, older than me, maybe mid-40s, wearing expensive clothes and one of those gold watches that screams money. They were holding hands, sharing drinks, and here's the part that made my stomach drop. Kissing like teenagers who just discovered what tongues were for. Matt said he watched them for as long as he could stomach it, hoping maybe he was wrong. Maybe it was just someone who looked like Lauren, but he'd known her since college. We'd all hung out together back in the day, gone to parties and football games as a group. There was no mistaking who he was looking at. The coldness that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. You know that feeling when you're in an elevator and it drops too fast. Except this was happening to my entire existence. My hands started shaking, my vision got weird around the edges, and I felt like I might actually throw up right there on my kitchen table. I asked if he was absolutely sure it was her. Stupid question, But my brain was scrambling for any possible explanation that didn't involve my wife cheating on me with some random guy on a cruise ship while I sat at home missing her and planning romantic surprises. Matt's voice got even more serious. He told me he'd known Lauren for over a decade, had watched her evolve from that college girl who wore too much eyeliner to professional woman who married his best friend. He wasn't making a mistake. It was definitely her, and she was definitely not at any business conference in Florida. Then he said something that made everything even worse. He'd taken pictures. Not because he wanted to, but because he knew I'd need proof. He knew that without evidence, I might convince myself he was wrong, or I might confront Lauren, and she'd just lie her way out of it. So he'd pulled out his phone and documented my wife's betrayal, like some kind of private investigator. The photos came through about 2 minutes later. 3 of them, crystal clear, taken from different angles. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. My wife of 5 years, the woman I'd helped pack for her business trip the day before, was on a cruise ship in the Caribbean, wearing a sundress I'd never seen, drinking champagne with a man I'd never met. In one photo, she was laughing at something he said, her head thrown back in that genuine laugh she used to give me when we first started dating. In another, they were holding hands across a small table, looking into each other's eyes like they were the only 2 people in the world. The third one showed them kissing, her hand on his chest, his arms around her waist. I sat there staring at those photos for probably 20 minutes, just trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't some random hookup or moment of weakness. These pictures showed intimacy, familiarity, comfort. This was a relationship that had been going on for a while. Long enough for them to book a cruise together. Long enough for her to lie to me about a business trip. Long enough for her to buy new clothes I'd never seen. Matt was still on the phone, apologizing for being the messenger, asking if I was okay, offering to do whatever I could to help. But his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I was drowning in the realization that my entire marriage was a lie, and I didn't even know how long I'd been living in this fantasy. The worst part wasn't even the cheating itself. It was how calculated it all was. The business trip story, the conference details, the regular text updates. She planned this whole elaborate deception just so she could go play house with some other guy on a cruise ship, while I sat at home like an idiot, proud of her career dedication. After I hung up with Matt, I sat in that kitchen for hours, just staring at those photos. The coffee got cold. The newspaper stayed unread, and my phone kept buzzing with text messages from Lauren that I couldn't bring myself to open. Each buzz felt like another lie, another layer of deception that I'd been too trusting to see before. I kept looking around the house, our house, the one I bought before we got married, the one she'd moved into and made suggestions about decorating and organizing. Suddenly, everything felt contaminated. The coffee mugs we bought together, the throw pillows she insisted we needed, the family photos on the mantel where we looked so happy and normal. How long had she been planning this? How many other business trips had actually been romantic getaways with this guy? How many times had she come home to me after being with him, kissed me with the same lips, slept in our bed after sleeping in his? The betrayal was complete and devastating, but what made it worse was how stupid I felt. I'd been the perfect supportive husband, helping her pack for her fake business trip, making jokes about boring conference presentations, planning surprises for her return. I'd been played so thoroughly that I actually felt proud of how understanding and supportive I was being. Matt had given me the truth that shattered everything, but he'd also given me something else, proof, clear, undeniable evidence of exactly what my wife was doing while I sat at home missing her. And as the initial shock started to wear off, a different kind of clarity began to set in. I wasn't going to be the guy who confronted her and gave her a chance to lie her way out of this. I wasn't going to be the husband who begged for explanations or tried to work through this betrayal. The photos on my phone had just shown me exactly who Lauren really was, and now it was time to show her exactly who I could be when pushed too far. Instead of doing what most guys would do, call her up screaming and demanding explanations, I did something that probably saved my entire financial future. I called my lawyer, not the family attorney who helped us with our wills and basic legal stuff, but the guy who'd handled my business and corporation and really knew his way around asset protection. His name was Robert, and he was the kind of attorney who charged $400 an hour and earned every penny of it. I'd use him when I first started my business, and he'd set things up in a way that protected me from potential lawsuits and creditors. Now I needed that same strategic thinking applied to my marriage. I drove straight to his office, photos still burning a hole in my phone, and laid out the entire situation. Robert listened without interrupting, taking notes on his yellow legal pad, nodding occasionally but keeping his expression completely neutral. When I finished talking, he leaned back in his leather chair and asked the two most important questions of my life. First question, had I purchased a house before we got married? Yes, I told him. I'd saved up for years, gotten pre-approved for mortgage, and closed on the property 6 months before Lauren and I even got engaged. It was my house, bought with my money in my name only. Second question, was my business established and operating under my sole ownership before the marriage? Again, yes. I'd started the company 3 years before we got married, built it from nothing, and never added Lauren's name to any of the business documents or accounts. Robert smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office. He told me I was in a much better position than most guys who found themselves in similar situations. Because I kept my major assets separate, there was a good chance I could protect everything if we moved quickly and strategically. He explained the game plan like a general mapping out a military campaign. First, we needed to establish a revocable trust and transfer the house into it, with me as the sole trustee and beneficiary. This would create an additional layer of protection and make it much harder for Lauren to claim any ownership interest in the property. Second, we needed to restructure my business assets, move the company's cash reserves into separate accounts, establish new operating agreements, and document everything to show that the business had always been my separate property and that Lauren had never contributed to its operations or growth. Third, and this was the part that made me realize how serious this was about to get, we needed to close all joint accounts and credit cards. Every shared financial connection between us had to be severed before she came back from her cruise and realized what was happening. Robert was brutally honest about the timeline. We had maybe 4 or 5 days before Lauren returned from her fake business trip. If we could get everything legally restructured and documented during that window, she'd have almost no claim to any of my assets. But if we waited until after she got back, if she had any warning about what was coming, she could potentially tie things up in court for years. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of paperwork, notarizations, and legal filings. I took time off work and basically lived in Robert's office, signing documents, transferring assets, and systematically dismantling every financial connection between Lauren and me. We set up the trust on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, the house was legally owned by the Michael Thompson Revocable Trust, with me as the sole trustee. Lauren's name appeared nowhere on the documents. Friday morning, we restructured the business, created new operating agreements, moved money into accounts that only I controlled, and documented the timeline of when everything had been established. Robert was thorough to the point of being obsessive, but I was grateful for it. Every detail mattered. Every date had to be perfect. Every document had to be bulletproof. Friday afternoon, I went to our bank and closed every joint account we had. The checking account where our paychecks got deposited, the savings account where we'd been putting money for a vacation we'd never take, the credit cards we used for groceries and gas. All of it gone in one afternoon. I opened new accounts in my name only and transferred my portion of our joint savings. Left her portion in a cashier's check that I planned to give her along with the divorce papers. I wasn't trying to steal her money. I just wanted to make sure she couldn't steal mine. The whole time this was happening, Lauren was sending me her usual updates from her fake business trip. Photos of hotel breakfast, complaints about boring conference sessions, generic messages about missing me and looking forward to coming home. Each text felt like another knife in my back, but I responded normally, told her I miss her too, asked about the weather, played the part of the caring husband. Meanwhile, I was working with Robert to file the divorce papers. We decided to wait until the day before she came back to actually file them with the court, just in case she somehow found out early and tried to rush back to do damage control. But we had everything prepared and ready to go. Robert explained that because we had no children, and I could prove that all my major assets were separate property, this would likely be a relatively straightforward divorce. Lauren might try to claim spousal support or argue for a share of the business, but the documentation we created would make that nearly impossible to prove. By Sunday night, everything was in place. The house was protected in the trust. The business assets were restructured and documented. All joint accounts were closed, and the divorce papers were ready to be filed first thing Monday morning. I'd transformed from betrayed husband to strategic plaintiff in less than a week. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Lauren was sipping champagne on a cruise ship with her boyfriend, probably laughing about how she'd fooled her stupid husband, I was working 18-hour days with my attorney to make sure she'd walk away from our marriage with nothing more than what she'd brought into it. Every photo Matt had sent me, every fake text she'd sent from her trip, every lie she told about the business conference, it all just motivated me to be more thorough, more strategic, more determined to win this war she didn't even know had started. I spent that Sunday night in my house, now legally protected and solely owned by me, thinking about how different my life was going to be in just 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, Lauren would be served with divorce papers, and this whole charade of marriage would be officially over. The best part was that she had no idea what was coming. She was probably lying in some cruise ship cabin with her boyfriend, planning what lies to tell me when she got home, maybe even laughing about how gullible and trusting her husband was. But while she was living in her fantasy world, I'd been busy in the real world, working with professionals who knew how to protect assets and terminate marriages efficiently. She thought she was playing me, but I'd been playing a completely different game, one where I held all the cards and made all the rules. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Sunday afternoon, I got the text I'd been waiting for all week. Lauren's flight had landed, and she was grabbing her luggage. She'd be home in about an hour. Couldn't wait to see me. Miss me so much. The same kind of loving messages she'd been sending all week from her romantic cruise with another man. I was sitting in my living room in my house, protected by my trust, with a manila envelope on the coffee table. Inside were the divorce papers that Robert had prepared, along with copies of all the legal documents we'd filed over the past week. Everything was organized, professional, and completely devastating to her future financial security. The house was spotless. I'd cleaned everything that morning, not because I was trying to impress her, but because I wanted our final conversation to happen in a space that felt controlled and organized. This wasn't going to be some chaotic screaming match. This was going to be a business transaction. I heard her key in the front door right on schedule. She called out that she was home, her voice bright and cheerful, like she was genuinely excited to see me after a week of boring conference sessions in Florida. The performance was impressive. I had to give her that. She walked into the living room with her suitcase, looking tan and relaxed and wearing a sundress I'd never seen before. Probably bought it specifically for the cruise, or maybe her boyfriend had bought it for her. She looked happy and refreshed, like someone who just spent a week being pampered and spoiled by a lover. The smile on her face faded when she saw me sitting there with the envelope. I wasn't rushing to hug her or asking about her trip, or acting like the welcoming husband she expected. I was just sitting there, calm and composed, watching her realize that something was very wrong with this homecoming. I stood up and handed her the envelope without saying anything. She took it automatically, still trying to process why I looked so serious and why there was no warm welcome waiting for her. She asked what it was, and I told her to open it and find out. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pulled out the papers. I watched her face change as she read the first page, confusion, then shock, then something that looked like panic. The divorce petition spelled everything out clearly. Irreconcilable differences, request for dissolution of marriage, division of assets according to separate property laws. She looked up at me with wide eyes and asked what this was supposed to be, like maybe it was some kind of elaborate joke or mistake. Her voice had that shaky quality people get when their world is suddenly tilting sideways and they can't figure out how to make it stop. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her Matt's photos. The look on her face when she saw herself kissing another man on a cruise ship deck was something I'll never forget. It was the exact moment she realized that her carefully constructed lie had collapsed completely. I told her that while she was enjoying her romantic Caribbean getaway, I'd been busy with my attorney. The house was now owned by a trust that only had my name on it. The business assets had been restructured and documented as my separate property. All our joint accounts had been closed, and her access to my financial life had been permanently severed. She tried to say something, but I wasn't finished. I explained that the divorce papers had already been filed with the court, and she had 30 days to respond. I prepared a cashier's check for her half of our joint savings, about $8,000, which was more than fair considering she'd been stealing emotional and physical intimacy from our marriage. The color drained completely out of her face. She sat down hard on the couch, still holding the divorce papers, looking like someone had just told her she had a terminal illness. She kept shaking her head and saying this couldn't be happening, like denial could somehow undo the legal reality I created while she was gone. She tried to explain about the cruise, stammering something about how it wasn't what it looked like, how she could make me understand if I had just listened. But I cut her off. I told her that the time for explanations had passed the moment she chose to lie to me about a business trip, so she could vacation with another man. The panic in her voice was getting stronger. She asked about the house, about where she was supposed to live, about how I could just cut off her access to everything without warning. I reminded her that this was my house, bought with my money before we were married, and that she'd never contributed $1 to the mortgage or maintenance. Then came the bargaining phase. She offered to end things with the other guy, promised it would never happen again, begged me to consider counseling or separation instead of divorce. She was crying now, real tears, but they felt more like tears of panic about losing her comfortable lifestyle than tears of genuine remorse for betraying our marriage. I told her she was welcome to try to fight the divorce, but Robert had made sure all the paperwork was bulletproof. She could hire her own lawyer and spend thousands of dollars trying to claim a piece of assets that were legally and provably mine, but she'd just end up broke and divorced instead of just divorced. The reality was sinking in. She was looking around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time, realizing that none of it had ever really belonged to her. The comfortable suburban life, the financial security, the social status of being married to a successful business owner, all of it was about to disappear. I opened the front door and told her it was time to leave. She could take her personal belongings, but everything else stayed with the house. I'd already packed her clothes and toiletries into garbage bags, which were sitting by the door. Professional movers would deliver anything else she needed once she found a place to live. She stood up slowly, still clutching the divorce papers, looking around the room one more time. I think she was finally understanding that this wasn't a negotiation or the beginning of a long emotional process. This was the end, final and complete, executed with surgical precision while she was off playing house with her boyfriend. She asked where she was supposed to go, and I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. Maybe her cruise boyfriend had room at his place. Maybe she could stay with friends or family. Maybe she could get her own apartment with the $8,000 I was giving her. But whatever she decided, she wasn't staying in my house. The last thing she said as she walked out the door was that she never thought I had it in me to be this cold and calculating. I told her she was right. The old Mike would have yelled and cried and tried to work things out. But the old Mike hadn't seen photos of his wife cheating on him while he sat at home missing her. I watched her load her garbage bags into her car and drive away. No dramatic scene with the neighbors. No screaming match on the front lawn. Just a quiet Sunday evening dissolution of a marriage that had been over the moment she decided to book that cruise with another man. After she left, I poured myself a beer and sat back down in my living room. The house felt different now. Cleaner somehow, like removing her presence had also removed some kind of contamination. For the first time in a week, I felt like I could breathe normally again. The next few weeks were a masterclass in watching someone realize they played themselves. Lauren tried calling and texting constantly at first, alternating between apologies and threats, between begging for another chance and promising to take me for everything I was worth in court. Each message just confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Her lawyer, some guy she found on Google who probably handled mostly DUIs and traffic tickets, sent Robert a letter demanding half of everything. The house, the business, spousal support, the whole wish list of someone who thought marriage was a lottery ticket. Robert's response was a stack of documents 3 inches thick, showing exactly when and how I'd acquired every asset and why none of it was subject to division. The funniest part was when she tried to claim she contributed to the business by providing emotional support and encouragement. Robert actually laughed out loud when he read that. Emotional support isn't a billable service, and encouragement doesn't show up on balance sheets. About a month after she moved out, I started hearing through mutual friends about her new living situation. Turns out cruise ship boyfriend wasn't as serious about their relationship as she thought. When she showed up at his place with garbage bags full of clothes and no place else to go, he suddenly remembered he wasn't ready for anything serious. She ended up moving in with her sister in a studio apartment across town. From what I heard, she was sleeping on an air mattress in the living room and splitting grocery bills. Quite a step down from a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage that she'd been living in with me. The sister, who I'd always gotten along with pretty well, actually called me once to ask if I considered taking Lauren back. She said Lauren was miserable, had learned her lesson, and would never cheat again. I told her that was probably true. Lauren had learned that cheating has consequences, but the consequence was losing me, not getting a second chance to do it better. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Lauren's lawyer had apparently advised her to settle rather than fight, probably after reviewing the mountain of evidence Robert had prepared. She walked away with her personal belongings, half of our joint savings account, and whatever she could get for her car. I walked away with my house, my business, my dignity, and a very expensive education about the importance of keeping your assets protected. Robert's bill was substantial, but it was a bargain compared to what I could have lost if I'd handled things differently. The whole process taught me something important about betrayal. It's not just about the cheating itself. It's about the elaborate deception that makes the cheating possible. Lauren didn't just sleep with another guy. She planned a fake business trip, researched conference details to make her lie convincing, and sent me daily updates designed to make me feel like a caring, supportive husband. 6 months after the divorce, I was having a beer with Matt and his wife Sarah at a barbecue when the subject came up. Sarah said she felt bad about ruining my marriage, and I had to correct her. She didn't ruin anything. She exposed something that was already ruined. I thanked them both for caring enough about me to deliver painful news that I needed to hear. Matt asked if I ever regretted handling it the way I did, if I ever wished I'd try to work things out instead of going straight to the lawyers. I told him the truth. The moment I saw those photos, I knew the marriage was over. The only question was whether I'd be smart about protecting myself or emotional about trying to save something that was already dead. That's the thing about betrayal on that level. Once you see your spouse kissing someone else on a cruise ship while you're at home missing them, there's no going back to the way things were. Trust isn't something you can rebuild from nothing. It's something you protect, and once it's gone forever. A year later, I heard Lauren had moved to another state and was working at some marketing firm making half what she used to make. Her sister mentioned that she was dating someone new, some guy who managed a chain restaurant and drove a 15-year-old Honda. I genuinely hoped she'd be happy with him, but I wasn't losing any sleep over her situation. Meanwhile, my business was doing better than ever. Turns out that channeling rage and betrayal into work productivity is surprisingly effective. I'd landed 3 major contracts in the months after the divorce, partly because I was working longer hours and partly because I was more focused without the distraction of a failing marriage. I was dating again, too, but taking it slow and being more careful about the kind of woman I let into my life. The experience with Lauren had taught me to pay attention to red flags I'd ignored before and to keep my assets protected no matter how much I trusted someone. The best part of the whole situation was knowing that Lauren had played herself completely. She thought she was being clever, lie about the business trip, so she could have her cake and eat it too. She probably imagined coming home from her romantic cruise and seamlessly returning to her comfortable suburban life with her clueless husband. Instead, she came home to find that her comfortable life had been systematically dismantled by professionals who knew exactly how to protect my interests. Every day she spent on that cruise ship was a day I used to make sure she'd have nothing come back to accept divorce papers and a harsh lesson about consequences. The most satisfying moment wasn't when she broke down crying or when she begged for another chance. It was when she realized that the man she'd married, the The trusting, supportive guy who helped her pack for fake business trips had been replaced by someone who understood that the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even. The best revenge is getting ahead. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole crazy story. I know it's a lot to process, and I'm curious what you all think. Did I handle this the right way, or was I too harsh? Have any of you been through something similar? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story helped you in any way, or if you just want to hear more content like this, smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Your support really means everything to this channel, and it helps me keep sharing these real-life experiences that we can all learn from. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.